Hey friends, welcome to Dishing on Divorce. I'm your host, Liza Lisser, CEO and founder of LZL Coaching, a boutique coaching firm focused on divorce, relationships, and life transitions. You may ask, what brings me to this work? And I'll tell you, life. You see, I was a New York City litigator before I had kids, and I left the practice to raise them. And then my son was diagnosed with a chronic illness at age 7, so I continued to stay at home to manage his care. In the meantime, I pursued volunteer leadership in the Jewish nonprofit world, and it fueled my passion and flexed my public speaking, board membership, program design, and fundraising muscles. But then another big disruptive life experience happened to me, and I saw myself becoming a divorced mom of 3 kids, but now they're in their 20s. Back in those days, it was really tough. It wasn't what I planned or expected, but it led me to where I am today, and I'm grateful to be here. I do this work as a divorce coach because it blends all my passions. It blends my skill sets as a leader, as an educator, and as an advocate, and it's personal. I know the fear. I know the overwhelm. And I know that you need help in ways that you can't imagine and you don't know where to find it. So I'm here to be your guide on the side. On today's show, we will speak with attorney Allison E. Holtzman. Allison is a family law attorney who supports people going through divorce. She and I connected immediately when we met, and I saw in her a compassionate person understanding of the overwhelm her clients face and their need for additional support beyond what she can provide as their legal advocate. We'll get into the weeds of what divorce looks like today from her side of the process. But before we get to the heart of today's show, you are watching and listening to the new streaming network, home of Going Solo Media and WGSN-DB, Going Solo Network radio, podcasts, and TV. You can find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Roku, and wherever you listen to your podcasts. And now I'd like to introduce Allison E. Holtzman. Allison.
Hi, Lisa. Thank you for having me.
Sure, it's my pleasure. So I'm gonna read your bio and then we'll talk, okay?
Sounds good.
So Allison has been practicing law since 2001 when she graduated from Fordham University Law School. Since 2002, she's devoted her practice exclusively to matrimonial and family law matters. Ms. Holtzman has handled complicated matters, ensuring a positive resolution for each of her clients. She's passionate about her work, and she ensures that each client receives individual attention. She explains the nuances that each client needs, and she works to help take her clients the next step forward in their personal lives. She's also a trained family mediator and has received training in collaborative law as well. She provides mediation services to assist parties in reaching mutual resolution of their family and matrimonial issues. She knows that divorce and its related legal matters can be the most difficult times in a family's life. And she understands that divorce is not the end of the relationship for families. For that reason, she tries to help her clients achieve amicable solutions to their legal issues. And that's generally her goal, to obtain harmonious resolutions. So, Allison, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you again for having me. It's great to see
It's
you.
my pleasure. So that was a mouthful. So I'm going to dig a little bit, and it's like hard when I'm reading the bio to really get in and get to know you. But what I noticed when I read your bio was that you've been focused on family law since the beginning of your law career. Pretty much in law school, you did it too. So what made you start in this field? What focused you so early on these issues?
I tell people this story, and if my mother's watching right now, she'll probably be embarrassed. But when I was a little girl, I used to watch Divorce Court with my grandmother on TV, much to my mother's dismay. It was one of our favorite things to do. So I've always just been attracted to it. And after my first year of law school, I was practicing at a large firm doing insurance defense work and working for big corporations. And it was unenjoyable to say the least. And again, referencing my mother, she told me my first job I needed to stay with for a year to show loyalty. So a year hit and I started applying for jobs at matrimonial firms because I wanted to help people. I wanted to work with people. And I felt like what better way than to help people to the next stage of their lives when they're going through something very difficult. Obviously, I wouldn't be talking to big companies and in-house counsel. I was going to get into the nitty-gritty and talk to people and talk about their lives and their desires and what their regrets are and how to move forward.
That's really amazing because so often when you get wrapped up in the whole law school, law track trajectory, you go for what's the most obvious role. Like what's the best paying job? What are the biggest
Right.
firms? Where can you get the most prestige? And you start to forget that maybe you got into the field because you wanted to help people and
Right.
not corporations. And so you really bucked a trend here by going really early on into the people world. And so that's really amazing.
Well,
And
thanks.
so, nice job, nice job. Um,
I try.
but at the same time, it's really hard. It's really hard to be with people in their most painful moments. And you said in the bio that sometimes these cases get really complicated, and they're complicated on a lot of levels. And I see that as a divorce coach. So what makes these issues so complicated, these cases so complicated? And what, and the second piece of that, part A and part B, is like, how do you ease the way for your clients?
It's you're right. It's difficult because it's an emotional part of the law. Most days, I feel like I'm a therapist, not a divorce attorney. The lawyering is probably the easier part of my job. And even from the most simplest divorce, meaning a young couple who's only been married for a handful of years and maybe have house and a bank account and a retirement account and no children, there's still emotion. And then that's on the one end of the spectrum. And then, working with couples who've been married for 20, 30 years and have children and so many assets, or maybe not a lot of assets, or maybe children who are ill and have special needs and a lot of debt. And it's the emotions and the constant wave of emotions and trying to help my clients not get stuck in that rut of the routine of the way they've reacted to
Right.
situations.
Right. So you see that part of the problem is this pattern that they've developed. It's like a dance that they've been in for all the years that got them to the place they're in. And then when they're in this challenging place, they continue the dance. And it's really hard. And you watch it happening. And you're trying to work with them to take some new dance steps, take
Yeah.
some new dance lessons, right?
Learning a new way of being, especially for my clients who have children, because they're going to stay connected to their spouse. And I tell everyone, you're still a family. You might not be an intact family, but you're still a family. And we've got to learn a new way of communicating and responding and reacting and just being, because what you're doing isn't working, obviously.
Right, right. And it's interesting because you use the word intact. And I have used that word as well. You're not an intact family. And yet you're a family and you'll always be a family. You just look different.
Right.
And the way that you're going to have to model behaviors is going to be different. And when we say not intact, we presume broken, right? Like and brokenness feels like failure. Like this is the sort of train of thought that people go through. And so they're living in this space of failure. And so they're trying to dig themselves out. And that's where I think the coaching comes in to help people recognize that you're not the only one. This is not a failure. This is just a different result than you expected.
Right.
And how do you move forward when it's different than what you expected?
Right. Which is much of life. It's,
Right,
it's not, this is only one example, but I would venture to say most people's lives do not just take the straight path that they
right,
hope or wish or assume. And so, um, you know, needing to figure out a way to respond to that and that journey and the bumps that we're on.
right, right. I mean, and that's where like you are doing like such a heavy lift to deal with the emotions and with the legal role. And that's where, when we spoke, it seemed like divorce coaching would be helpful in your realm because I could help you with some of the clients that are really stuck. I mean, you're excellent at what you do. So in many cases, right? In many cases, your clients may not need to go outside of the realm of what you do. But also in other cases, and even in some of those same cases, everyone can use an extra voice, right? Everyone can use a little guidance on how to get out of our own way.
Right.
And that's
That's
what the
exactly
coach,
it. Getting
yeah,
out of your own way.
you got to get out of your own way. You got
Yeah.
to stop telling the story that you've been telling for so many years because then that becomes real and
Right.
it becomes a really heavy weight. And if you can start redesigning what you'd like your future to be, instead of
Right.
I can't have the future I wanted, you can say I get to have a different future. And people don't realize that they have a new opportunity. They're looking at more like a new boulder is on their back rather than a new opportunity. And
Right.
it's hard. It's
It's
hard to look
hard.
at it that way.
It's hard. I say to every potential new client during, our initial consultation, I promise you there is light at the end of the tunnel. And I mean it, and I sincerely believe that. And I remind my clients as we're going through the process, there is light. You will get there. We will get there together. Sometimes, again, even that journey is
Right.
not what we anticipated it happening, or how it's going smoothly. But
Right.
there is hope, and it's just figuring out how my clients can, you know, imagine it differently, and then not only imagining it, putting those steps into place
Right.
to, help themselves.
Right. Right. And so one of the things that is coming out from our discussion is that it sounds like you really give each of your clients personal attention. Like they really can communicate with you.
I try.
A lot of my clients say that they send an email and their lawyer doesn't get back to them. And like, are they allowed to call? This is just a little question. Can they ask it? And, one of the things I share with my clients is that let's figure out what you really need to ask your lawyer before you call them. And
Right.
so instead of just waiting for me to help you process what your lawyer says, let's see what do you want your lawyer to respond to? And I'm wondering like how do you respond when your clients send you like a huge written email or just wants to keep you on the phone forever? Like what's next?
So that's actually probably easier, to address than the clients who email 17 times in a day,
Okay.
and maybe 17 times in an hour, and just continue because they need to be engaged. And that's what it really is about. It's the questions that are firing back and forth. They're the same question, just written in a different way. Um, the clients who need, send the hey, this is urgent, and 3-page email with all of the emotion over something that happened over the weekend or an argument, or clients who call me, hey, I know it's dinner time for your kids, but this is going on. That's almost the easier stuff to handle, because usually we can talk that through in a couple of minutes, and we
Okay.
realize, okay, it's just a big moment. um as you asked that question, I actually was thinking about one of the women who I had referred to you and who I believe you spoke with. And, she's a young woman and she's a mother of a small child. And she needs the constant back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. And she runs through her legal fees, and I have no problem responding, and I have no problem responding 17 times in an hour if I'm not in mediation or away from my desk. But that's not helpful, and I'm then repeating the same pattern with her that she needs to break. And so that's where I've said, hey, I know this wonderful divorce coach, Lisa, why don't you reach out and have a conversation with her? Because those are the people who need to. She doesn't necessarily need a therapist also. She may have one, but she needs the coaching of not just with her lawyer, but with her ex-husband and with her ex-husband's mother and with X person and Y person, how to sort of react differently and approach things differently, because it's not going as smoothly as she thought it was going to.
Right, right. And that's where, you can spot it. You can spot the clients who are like in danger of stepping on their own feet, right? Like if we're going to use
Right.
the dance motif or the dance metaphor, right?
Mm-hmm.
She's in a dance, but she's stepping on her own toes.
Right.
Because she's making all the wrong moves. And it doesn't mean that she won't learn the steps, but it will take a lot longer because she's not pausing to notice where she's messing up.
Right.
And
I think when you and I met, as we were talking, I said, this one.
Yeah.
I was so quick. I didn't even have to think about my clients. Oh, let me think who might work for you. I immediately said, oh, I know, 5 or 6 right off the bat who would benefit tremendously from having somebody else in their corner who isn't getting into the deep-seated trauma that they may have faced or how to heal from something, but how to just handle things differently and react and approach things in a different way, and to I hate defining things with the word, but how to be coached into a
right. Well, one of the
way.
things like for this particular, cycle, it's a specific conflict that keeps on happening.
Right.
And I have an exercise called the conflict pivot, where I can ask the client, so how does this conflict usually show up? And then I ask, and how do you usually respond in this conflict? And what about that response works? And what about that response doesn't work? And how would you like it to work better? And then we talk about what are the things that you see in your control that you could do differently.
Right.
And we walk through the kinds of steps that the client could take to respond to the same pattern, but do it differently. And that's where they're learning new dance steps.
Right. And it's giving them the control, to your
Right.
point. It's giving them the control over their own lives. They're not just reacting to their own lives anymore,
Right.
but they're taking a proactive role in what the future is going to look like.
Right. And what's hard, and what I've seen in my own clients, is that they live in what they know, right? And their identity is wrapped up in being wrapped up in the cycle, right? Their identity is, oh my God, this keeps happening to me. This keeps happening to me. This is my life. This is the story. How come this keeps happening to me? But this is who I am. And so the idea that they can control it so that it's not their identity is almost scary.
Sure.
Because it's not, then they're someone else. But when you take those steps and teach them that they actually can be someone else, it can be a huge aha moment.
Right.
And it can change the trajectory of the divorce and their life.
Yeah. I mean, I think that's so important for people going through a divorce, and especially for those who feel like they've had no control over their lives. And maybe they've had no control over the decision to get divorced, whether it was abuse of some form, financial abuse or verbal abuse, or somebody else made the decision, but it's giving these people the power to start to make their own decisions and to make decisions for their future and feel like this is my life and I get to decide how it's going to look, and not just be an observer on the sidelines.
Right, right. And I think that's a great moment for us to take a short break, and we will be back with more of Allison Holtzman. And we're back. So we left and we were discussing how we can empower our clients to actually be in power and to recognize that they have more control than they thought they had. So how does that work when you're in the middle of the case and like you are preparing your client for a mediation or a hearing or a motion, and then the morning of or at 5 o'clock the day before, you get an adjournment notice? And so, you've been like getting your client right up to, it just happened yesterday. So like, and my client is like, oh my gosh. And so, I'm wondering, how do we share with our clients that despite that, they still have control and power in this situation?
Yeah, I mean, that's difficult. I'd love to know some tips from you for myself also, because it's frustrating for everyone. You plan, you schedule, you strategize, you meet, you get emotionally ready for it. And I don't mean just my clients. I get emotionally ready for it also, and then it feels like a punch in the gut. Once again, something happens and it's not in our control. There's no, I don't have a good answer yet. So truly, I would love some tips from you as to, how to help some clients, because it's just saying, this is again, just another bump. And just because a court might have adjourned it or someone got sick and we had to reschedule, doesn't mean it's not going to happen. It's just a little later than we had anticipated. But depending on what the situation might be, maybe it gives us a little time to have a conversation with the opposing side and try to resolve things rather than just wait on the sidelines for someone else to make that decision.
So I remember my own situation, and every time there was an adjournment, it was so frustrating. And I kept on thinking, why does he never have to answer anything, right? Like, why does he never have to, comply with any deadline?
Sure.
And what it turns out, so we feel like we are sort of like completely powerless. But I wonder if we sort of shift the frame related to who has the power. So when it comes to the timing and like the cadence of the case, it feels like the other party has the power because they're stopping and making it go stop and go. But partly because they are afraid of something going forward. If something goes forward, then they're going to have to make a decision that they don't want to make.
Right.
They're going to have to reveal information that they don't want to reveal. So one of the things I share with my clients is that it's not win or lose, it's win or learn. So, so what can we learn every time they adjourn something? So like in this case, it was like a parenting, mediation. You like the required parenting mediation, no lawyers, just the parents and the
Right.
court-appointed mediator.
Mm-hmm.
And like at midday, the day before, the wife's counsel asked for an adjournment because she suddenly had a meeting that she couldn't miss, right?
Right.
Mind you, they live in the same house, right?
Sure.
Whatever. And he's so frustrated and he feels like he's, and so I shared with him this this win or learn. And he's like, I don't get it. I don't feel it yet. And I said, I completely understand. It's hard. But what if it's really that she just can't reach a place where she's ready to even start making decisions?
Right.
That she just wants to live in limbo because she feels like that's where she sticks in power.
Yeah.
And she's not going to be able to live in limbo forever. So what if that's what's really going on for her?
Oh, I see that all the time. All
Yeah.
the time with other parties, with my own clients. I can think of all of the different roadblocks people have thrown up to try to avoid the end of it. Someone going to rehab to, well, now I don't have to make a decision because I'm in rehab. And then, think about how the party on the other end receives that. And now their lives are just on hold. And is this even a serious attempt? Um, I've seen, I still can think back probably 10 years ago to a case that was on the eve of trial, and we were in court, and there was the associates, which I was at the time, and the partners and the accounting experts and a mental health professional, and weeks worth of just sitting there in a hallway negotiating and then fighting at the last minute over airline miles. And you can only imagine there were tremendous assets if we had all of those people. And that was just clearly somebody who needed to hang on. And that wasn't, she wasn't looking to stay married. The marriage was over. Everybody was living separately. Everything else was resolved. But it's so scary for people because then what is the new normal and how is that going to look? And some of it is not even with what the marriage was, but it's the dance of the divorce process.
Right.
And if we're not engaged in that and arguing over this and having our lawyers send things and attacks back and forth, then what? What do I have to focus on now? And the quiet in people's mind, I think, can be so scary.
Right. I mean, it's like, who am I without the fight?
Right.
And so how can you encourage your client to recognize that they actually have more power? Because if they can live without the fight, if they can recognize that they are ready to move forward while their partner has only one identity, it's only one dimensional, but they have more, then maybe they can hang on a little bit longer.
Right.
It's not easy, and you have to be really strong. And so my role is to help my clients find that strength. But it's all about the frame and the story you tell.
Right. Right.
And so, I work on it. I work on it every day with my clients because it's so disappointing. It's the disappointment
Right.
that just is like, as you said, it's like the punch in the gut. It's like you've been working and working, you're running up the hill, and then you get to the top and it's a cliff. There's no other side to run down.
Right.
So that's really a challenge. So I have a question that came up today. I was on the phone. I got a call from a friend of mine who has had some new business lately, and she actually is she's a consultant for education, and what she has been invited to do from family lawyers is to evaluate services in different school systems so that that one parent who wants to leave a school district can share the benefits of where they want to move for purposes of getting custodial rights in a divorce settlement. So,
I need her name.
okay.
If my client's listening right now, she's screaming in the background.
Yeah, well, I will give you her name when we're done. So,
yeah, I mean, that's a huge issue these days. I would say it's not necessarily custodial rights. We often say it's just more, you know, educational rights, if you will, in terms of everybody still has joint legal custody and the right to make major life decisions with regard to the education, but it's where they're going to attend school. And especially with more and more children having IPs and 504s, it's a tremendous issue. The case that I'm referencing, actually, the child has an IEP, and when we were in mediation discussing where the child would be better served, and we were all tasked with calling the second school district to find out what services they'd offer, and they said, well, we're not going to talk to you
yeah.
until a registered student. But we couldn't register him until we knew if the services were going to be met.
Let me just go back a step. So I don't know if my audience or our audience knows what's an IEP, what's a 504, like a 504.
They're as a family law attorney, I don't even want to define them I'll do it the wrong. I'll do a disservice, but it's for children who have special needs in school, and so it provides them extra services. And so whether they get pulled out of class or they have services in class, and so it might be allowing extra time for a test or speech services, things of that nature.
Right. So I'm familiar because my son has type 1 diabetes, and we didn't have an IEP, but we had a 504, which was for his medical needs. So if he needed to test his blood sugar before he took an exam, that was a special accommodation.
Right.
So that's what this is.
Yeah.
So and this was my friend who reached out to me was calling it was an interstate case. So the mother lived in New York, the father wanted to move to Maplewood. Maplewood had much better services for a child with autism, but the mother lived on Long Island. And that's where the family started. So the mother wound up getting the custody and having the school system, even though that school system had very few services for the autistic child.
Right.
So I just was wondering like how that comes up. And then I saw it as a situation where the parents could use some coaching on how to share the information. Because, if you come and you say, mine are better, I win, that's not how you're going to achieve your goal.
Right. Well, that parents need to learn together how to share information. And I'm curious, do you ever, I'm throwing the interview at you now, do you ever meet with two parties together? If it's a collaborative divorce or if it's a very amicable situation, do you ever divorce coach for the two parties together?
Right. So far in my practice, I have not. But I am working with some other divorce coaches who do. And what that is about, it's not couples counseling and it's not mediation.
No.
But it really is about learning how to approach conversation.
Right.
And it's learning about how we communicate. And it's not about trying to get one over the other person, which sometimes in mediation, people feel like that's what it is, which it shouldn't be, but sometimes people feel like that's what it is. But I have not yet done that, but I'm looking into that.
Yeah, I think it's a great service. Years ago, when I did my first collaborative case, and we sent the couple to a divorce coach together just to do exactly that, to just have at least one conversation about how to communicate differently and more effectively. And the interesting part for me was they were pretty acrimonious before that. And then they went and they came to our next meeting and giggling together about, what their conversation was and what they found helpful and what they thought was not helpful, but it helped. And, to this day, I'm still in touch with my client, and I know that it really has helped them. They have 3 children. They've navigated from little boys to now the youngest is starting college, and they've been able to navigate things in just a different way. And that was from one divorce coaching session.
Right.
So
because in a divorce coaching session, you can say things that you might not say in couples counseling.
right.
Right. And you can say, you call things out, right? Like I also do spiritual counseling where I'm like calling people to like their come to God moments, whatever. But where you say like, is that really going to get you what you want or need?
Right.
Because sometimes people do things that they know are the opposite of what they want or need.
More often than not. And
Yeah.
that's where I think your service is such a tremendous asset, because it's helping us, again, back to what we were talking about earlier, which is not repeating the cycle, but thinking about a different way of, what is it that you want? What is it that you need? And how can we get there?
Yeah. And that's perfect. That's a great place to end.
Couldn't have planned it better if I tried.
Yeah, perfect. We couldn't have planned it. So the last question I want to ask you, to close perhaps, what's a trend you're seeing these days in clients who are walking through your door?
I think people are a lot more educated. People see that New Jersey courts are super backed up.
Mhm.
Many counties are 2 and 3 years behind. And so they're educating themselves on mediation and collaborative, and recognizing that they need to come in a little bit more open to compromise and seeing things not so black and white. So that's the trend I've seen certainly in the last few years.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love it. And I'd love to talk to you more about like that one magic session, because we should get on board for that.
Yeah, I'll bring them in. They'll tell us what worked and what didn't.
Okay. And with that, how can people find you?
So I'm counsel at Ross and Calandrillo. We are a family law firm of 5 attorneys in Mountainside, New Jersey. My email is aeh@rcfamilylawyers.com, and our website is www.rcfamilylawyers.com. And
Great.
feel free to reach out.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'm so glad. This was a lot of fun.
This was a lot of fun. Thank you for
Yeah.
having me.
And it was not just fun, but we learned something. We learned a lot. So I
Yeah.
appreciate it,
We
really.
did.
So you can find me, my audience can find me at lzlcoaching.com, and you can book a complimentary discovery call through my website or email me at lisa@lzlcoaching.com. You are watching and listening to the new streaming network, home of Going Solo Media and WGSN-DB Going Solo Network Radio, podcasts, and TV. You can find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, YouTube, and Roku with the new streaming channel app.